All right, everyone. Good evening. This is Bob Vincent, the chair. I call the meeting to order. If you can help me, Sam, with this, let's do roll call attendance.
Sure, I'll go
So,
through the names on the
yeah,
list
if
if
you
you'd
could,
like.
please.
Okay. Yeah, I have it right in front of me. It's fine. Okay, so Alex Cavino, which I believe is they're absent. And then Samuel Hockenberry,
Present.
Karen McMaster,
Here.
John Seeger. John, if you're here, you're muted still. Okay, well, all right, I'll go to the next person. Don Valerio.
Here.
All right. Mr. Butler is absent. Lorna Davidson Connolly.
Here.
Karen DeJoy.
Here. Here.
Okay, I hear you. Theo.
Here.
Carol Plotkin.
Here.
Gail Sievert.
Here.
And Robert Vincent.
Yeah, so we have, it looks like we have 9 of the 12.
Yep.
Okay, so I don't mind disclosing this to all of you, but I'm a disabled veteran and I'm having some difficulties today. So I talked to Sam earlier and I'm going to need her assistance in getting through the meeting. Okay. So right now, since we have, Sam, do we have the folks online from the consultant? Or do you want to go over to Mr. Mullen first since he's online?
I will go to Mr. Mullen first.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do that, and Tom can give us the overview of the open meeting law. And Tom, especially this one's a little bit different because we have a consultant that we're dealing with, as well as 12 members of the advisory committee, and of course we have a town official. So sometimes it gets a little thorny on who can talk to whom and when. And thanks for being here tonight, Tom.
Oh, anytime, Mr. Chairman, and I hope you're feeling better soon. I want to talk very briefly but practically about the open meeting law. And please, anybody, stop me anytime if you have questions, or we can have questions after I'm done, whichever you like. The big picture is really quite simple. You have to post notice of meetings. You must allow the public to attend, except in executive session, and you must keep minutes. So, okay, who does this law apply to? Well, it applies to any public body, which is any multi-member board, commission, committee, or subcommittee, no matter how it is created, that is created by or for the town of Wakefield. We often see school committee or other meetings, for example, of so-called working groups, where there's a couple of members and they go off to do something and report back to the whole committee. Very frequently, those working groups are not treated as public bodies. They don't post their notices. They don't take minutes. Every one of those is a public body because it is a subcommittee of the whole, created by the school committee or whatever the whole is. And no matter what you call it, it's a subcommittee. So it's a meeting and it has to be posted and they have to take minutes. The one exception in town government is town meeting. Town meeting is not subject to the open meeting law, which is why we can exclude people. People who aren't registered voters in Wakefield have no right to be in the room unless the meeting votes to permit it. So what then is a meeting for purposes of the open meeting law? Well, it's a deliberation of a public body with respect to any matter within its jurisdiction. Okay, we talked about what a public body is. What is deliberation? It's any communication, oral or written, through any medium, including email, between or among a quorum of the public body on any public business within its jurisdiction. So a quorum, as you all know, is the number of members you need to hold a meeting. And for our purposes, it's a majority. So you've got, I think I just heard 12 members. Anytime 7 of you get together, there's a quorum. So if a majority of you got together in person or on the phone or communicated with each other by email and start talking about something within your jurisdiction, that's a meeting. The Attorney General construes deliberation to include the mere expression of an opinion about a matter within the body's jurisdiction by one member so that enough other members to form a quorum have become aware of what his opinion is. So let's say one member of the town council, which has 7 members, emails 3 others and says, I want a new town hall. Well, even if the other 3 don't respond, that's deliberation, because now an opinion on a town council matter has been shared among a quorum. And that shouldn't happen outside a posted meeting. And the Attorney General views serial communication among board members as an evasion of the law. So if one town councilor let's call him, emails B to say he wants a new town hall, and then B emails C to relay what he heard from A, and so forth until a quorum has been reached, again, that's deliberation. The only exception is for scheduling. So you can have any number of members of a public body communicating outside a meeting on the question, when and where do we meet? But don't get into the specifics of what you're going to be talking about at the meeting, just when and where. Any body, and the body may receive a packet of email with material about an upcoming meeting. So if, for example, in advance of tonight's meeting, you received an email or a physical packet of information about the open meeting law from me, or some kind of work product from the consultant you're going to speak to, there's nothing wrong with that. So long as there's no expression of opinion by one member to a quorum in that material. It's also not a meeting if a quorum of the public body attends a public or private gathering, including a conference or a training program, or a media or social event, so long as they don't deliberate. Now, I think you are probably unlikely to have on-site inspections the way, say, the Conservation Commission does when they go off and walk the property that they are working on. But if you ever did have the occasion to do that, the on-site inspection can be done without posting and without keeping minutes, provided that you don't engage in deliberation. So if you want to talk about the substance of what you're seeing at a site visit, then you have to treat it as a meeting. I recommend that all site visits not be treated as meetings, among other reasons, because meetings are supposed to be accessible, physically accessible to the handicapped, and most site visits really are not. So, okay, we say that if it's a meeting, you've got to post notice. What do you post? Well, the statute says a listing of topics that the chair reasonably anticipates will be discussed at the meeting, at least 48 hours in advance. Since the posting is supposed to be at least 48 hours in advance, it's a list of what the chair thinks is going to be discussed at that point. So if the chair posts notice, say, 4 days in advance and learns 3 days out of some new topic, he has to post an amended agenda. Weekends and holidays do not count for purposes of calculating the 48 hour that must precede the meeting with a posting. Frequently you see on agendas kind of generic terms like new business. The Attorney General looks askance at all catch-alls like that. It's much better to be more specific. And if you expect that an executive session is going to be used, then you should say so. Executive session expected, for example. Let me talk briefly about executive session, but I want you to remember your board would be extremely unlikely to go into executive session unless I misunderstand your purpose. So if you ever are tempted to go into executive session, please call me first. The major reasons why boards go into executive or secret session is to, one thing is to discuss reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health of individuals, or to discuss strategy about collective bargaining or litigation, or to screen applicants for an appointment. And you go into executive session always in open session. So every meeting, even if you expect that all of the substantive work is going to be secret, every meeting has to begin in open session, if only so that you can tell the public, we're going into executive or secret session, and here's the reason why. So first you convene an open session, and then there's a motion to go into executive session, which has to specify the reason and has to specify it as in as much detail as you can without giving away the very reason, without defeating the purpose of the executive session. And then the vote has to be by roll call, as you're accustomed to roll call votes, because all votes in a remote meeting such as yours must be done by roll call. And let's talk briefly about minutes. Every set of minutes should identify all the members who were present at the meeting and all who are absent. That's frequently missing, but it's important and it's called out by the statute. You have to record all votes, should be done word for word. And if a roll call is taken, you have to record each member's vote, how he voted on each of those questions. And it must include a, here I'm quoting, summary of the discussions on each subject, end quote. A transcript is not required. In fact, it's not even permitted. If it were, we might just hire a stenographer. Rather, it must contain enough detail so that someone who hadn't attended the meeting would have a clear idea of what was going on. In one case, there was an executive session of 1 hour and 25 minutes on contract negotiations, and the town body, wasn't Wakefield, summarized it in 2 short sentences. And the Attorney General said, no, you got to redo the minutes. This is unreasonable. You should include in your minutes a list of all documents, plans, and so forth that were used at the meeting. They don't necessarily become part of the minutes, but they must be preserved. So anybody who wants to make use of them can. And you are supposed to review and approve any executive session minutes in a timely manner, and declassify them as when the need for secrecy passes. And finally, let's talk about the conduct of the meeting. You have to let anybody who wishes to attend your meeting, listen to it, watch it, and record it, provided that the recording is not obstructive. If there is a recording, the chair should announce at the beginning that it is anticipated to be recorded. No one may address the board without the chair's permission, and violators should be warned that the police can be asked to remove anyone who is obstreperous. Please don't try that without exhausting every alternative. In the worst case, if somebody were obnoxious and refused to shut up and sit down upon request, I would recommend that you first pause the meeting, suspend it, and let him cool down and ask him to be a good citizen, see if that works. The public never has a right to speak at an open meeting unless there's a public hearing or you have been so unwise as to create an opportunity for public participation. A public hearing exists if there's a statute or a bylaw that says the public has a right to express themselves on a particular matter. So, for example, annually, the school committee has to come up with a budget. And there's a statute that says when they do their budget, they have to hold a hearing about it. That means anybody, not necessarily just a Wakefield resident, but anybody has the right to come into the room, get up and speak. You can set reasonable rules for their speech. You can say no more than 3 minutes. You can say, we want you to speak to the subject, but you have to let them speak. And the other alternative that I mentioned was public participation. If you, again, have been so unwise as to say that there will be a public participation portion of your meeting, well, you've committed yourself, and then you have to allow members of the public to come in and speak. And the only requirement there is that you have to treat everybody the same way, obviously. Give everybody the same amount of time. And there was a decision by the Supreme Judicial Court just last year in a Southborough case that the board may not require people who participate in public participation sessions to be civil or polite or respectful. To the contrary, they can be insulting, and they cannot be forced to stop talking, no matter how insulting they are. In that case, an individual insisted on calling the chair a Hitler, something the chair, rightly bristled about. And when the chair ordered that speaker to stop talking, the result was a lawsuit that the town lost. And the chair was sued in his individual capacity, I believe, as well as having the town sued. I think it's obvious, but let me say it. You never take a secret ballot in an open meeting or in an executive session. And the Attorney General enforces the open meeting law. There are penalties. Rarely are monetary penalties assessed, but they do exist up to $1,000. And reliance on advice of counsel is a bona fide defense. So please, if you're ever in doubt, call me before doing anything that risks any liability to yourself or the town. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Mullen.
I have one quick question, and not that we're going to get any of this, but like, it sounds like there's a fine line between sort of free speech and then disruptive conduct. Like, is there any guidance there? Like when, like in your example, should that chair have just suspended the meeting at that point?
No, that chair should have sat there and taken it.
Got it.
Take it like a man, is pretty much what the Supreme Judicial Court said. The only limit that the court put on it was orderliness. And they didn't explain their terms very well, but I understand that to mean that speakers have to abide by basic rules of order, such as you don't speak until you are recognized by the chair. You don't speak longer than the period of time that's accorded everybody. You do not have the right to, well, maybe to yell. I suppose if someone were yelling when it was perfectly possible for him to speak at a normal volume, maybe that would be a basis for taking action against him. But the substance of what he said, no matter how insulting, or she said actually in that case, had to be tolerated. And that's the lesson of that case, and a lesson for every board, especially in deciding whether to invite public participation.
I have a question. When we get to, again, with public participation, you said it's unwise to post that there's going to be public participation. But I thought the public was supposed to be able to speak at any of the open meetings. So how
No, absolutely not. The open meeting law does not entitle the public to speak at open meetings. The meetings are open in the sense that the public has the right to attend, to listen, to watch, and to record by audio tape, videotape, whatever. If you create a public participation period, then you have committed yourself to allowing public participation by anybody who wishes to speak. And you can't discriminate among them, even as between obnoxious people and respectful people. Which is why I say I think it's unwise to create that opportunity. You've got work to do. Get to it, and don't waste your time listening to what oftentimes is people who want to hear themselves gab. So the exception there, and it doesn't apply to your board, is where there's a statute or a bylaw that requires a public hearing. So if Theo, for example, is on the planning board has to have a public hearing about every zoning amendment. And so during that public hearing, the planning board has to invite members of the public to speak, and they have to listen to them. But otherwise, the only way a member of the public has a right to speak would be if you give it to them. And if you give it to anybody, you've got to give it to everybody. So hence my jaded advice. Incidentally, I have said the same thing to every board that's invited me to speak. They all ignore me. So it's not like I expect you to take my advice. Everybody ignores me on this point. Be my guest.
And the point you're making, Tom, is for a public hearing, you have to give people an opportunity to be heard.
For a public hearing, you have to. And if you have created an opportunity through public participation.
Correct.
Because
sometimes people get confused with the town bylaw 927 that deals with public hearings. And I've had people say, well, you got to give 5 minutes because it's a public hearing. And I go, well, there's a difference between public hearing and public participation. Right. And obviously we've ignored you because we did put down public comments for tonight's meeting, but that is customarily done in Wakefield. What I did want you to touch base on real quick, this one is a little bit different because we have a consultant and we have a town employee, the town planner, who works with us on this committee. And sometimes it's a little confusing with folks with what if we get something from the consultant and says, give us your input, and everybody on the this advisory committee responds to the consultant or responds to the town planner, to Sam. What's the difference between that and responding amongst ourselves?
Well, if there's a quorum of you that is at least 7, then you're having a meeting. And if there are fewer, there's no meeting. Okay.
Right.
And Sam doesn't count, and the consultant doesn't count.
Correct.
Okay.
And sometimes the consultant will ask us for feedback, send an email and say, hey, let me know what you think about survey questions. And then everybody responds to the consultant, but they copy all. Is that a problem?
That's a huge problem. Yeah, don't do that. Okay.
That's why I wanted to go over as far as corresponding with the consultant and corresponding with Sam Elliott. If you could just expand on that a little bit.
Okay, so you hire people like Sam, people like me, people like your consultant to advise you on different things. It's perfectly okay for any of us, Sam, me, the consultant, to send out our advice to all the board members. It's not okay for the board members to respond all, because when they do, they are sharing their opinion on a matter within their jurisdiction with a quorum of the board, and that's deliberation, which is something you can do only at a posted meeting. Okay? So, and once you get to a posted meeting, of course, have at it. Ask the consultant all the questions you want. Have him or her advise you all you want. Do as you're doing with me right now. There's a quorum of you. You're all asking good questions that have been on your mind about the open meeting law. I'm responding. We're going at it back and forth. That's what these meetings are supposed to be about. And the public has an opportunity to watch and judge your performance and mine and Sam's and the consultants. That's what our little democracy is supposed to be about.
Right. So when we get correspondence from the consultant asking us to opine on like a draft questions they have for a survey, we should respond just directly back to the consultant only, not reply all.
Yeah, in that case, if the consultant wants to know what each member thinks, that's okay. The members can individually respond to the consultant, but they should absolutely not share their responses among each other, except at a meeting. Once you get at a meeting, you can talk about anything.
And that's also true with corresponding with Sam Elliott as the planner.
Same in dealing with Sam, same in dealing with me.
Now, when somebody sends an email to Sam or sends an email to the consultant, can or should they copy the chair and vice chair of this committee on that, or just send it directly to the town planner or the consultant?
Well, they can't. Yeah, that is, if they were to copy just 2 members, the chair and vice chair, that wouldn't violate the open meeting law because, again, you've got a quorum of 7.
Correct. Yeah, these are just, it's a little bit different when you're dealing with a town employee and you're also dealing with a consultant. And that's why I kind of wanted you to expand on that a little bit. But I don't know if anyone else has any questions, but I appreciate you taking the time tonight, Tom, to clarify this for us.
Oh, sure. Happy to.
Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Mullen? Sam, if you can help me out and see if anybody's raised their hand.
Sam's muted, but none of us have our hands.
I was going to say thank you. Bob, it doesn't look like anybody has their hand up. It looks like Theo's unmuted, but I don't know. Did you have a question, Theo?
No, just, this is really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mullen. As always, I appreciate your sage advice, which I followed religiously for the last few years.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Take care. Sam, as you help me out here, before we bring on the consultant, I don't know if they're on yet. Can we see if we have any public comments? I don't know if any members of I know we just, didn't follow Mr. Mullen's advice, but we do have public comments listed as item 4. Do we know if we have
Yeah.
any public comments?
We don't have any members of the public present right now, as only the members of the committee. So that's at your
Okay.
discretion if you wanted to close that section.
Yeah, fine, we can close that. And then I should have known the answer to this, but I don't. The minutes, item 5, were they disseminated? Have we all had a chance to look at them? I went on the website and I wasn't able to pull
No, I think,
that up.
excuse me, I'm sorry. I've been sick for the last week. I think when I sent all of this out, I forgot to include the minutes, which is my fault. So you'll have to continue that to the next meeting.
So we'll continue. And I wasn't the chair the first meeting that took place, and I wasn't even at the first meeting that took place, but those minutes have been approved then, right? Prior to October 15th. Didn't we have a meeting prior to
Correct.
that? All right, but they
Correct.
were approved at the last meeting. Okay. So we'll just take the item 5 and do that at our next meeting. I had comments, but I'm not gonna go over them tonight because I'm just not in a condition to do that. So I think the only thing we have left on here is the item number 3, right? The consultant. Are they on now?
Hold on. No, they're not, but I can go over the material really quickly. And then I can work on getting it emailed out. I'm not sure why they're not here. They may have had some sort of emergency. So the housing needs assessment, there's a draft that's put together. It is still I've been going back and forth with some comments on it because it was originally really like graph and chart heavy versus a lot of kind of analysis or narrative attached to it. So they're working on doing some updates of that. The survey is technically closed now, but we got, I want to say close to just under, I think 400 responses. They're also working on setting up some interviews and focus groups with a variety of different people that had been provided to them, both from the town side as well as from the advisory committee. So they'll be working on getting those handled, I believe, after the New Year, since the holiday is a little bit chaotic for everybody. And so hopefully this week you should have a copy of the housing needs assessment sent out to you so that you can review, and then just email me and the you can either email just me or email me and the consultant back any comments you have or questions about the housing needs assessment, which kind of just reviews where we are currently. So it talks about what our demographics are, what our current and projected housing numbers are, current projected population, and then also kind of how income plays into all of that, as well as some other components of housing. So it's just kind of giving you the basic kind of data that they're basing the housing production plan, which is the plan itself, which has some actionable items. It's what they're basing it off of. So that's what they're working on putting together right now. And that should be going out, I believe he said this week, after we have we have, I think, just a couple more edits on the draft. And I think those are the really big things. I'm sorry they're not here to answer any other questions. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I believe that it's, so that's all for that item.
Does anyone have any questions for Sam?
I actually have a question. Sam, on the 400 respondents, is there any breakdown of who those people are? Are they all, 30 years old or 85 years old? Do you have the demographics of those respondents?
Um, on a number of the physical surveys that I got, there were comments about people not wanting to share their information or wondering why the information was important, what income had to do with housing, which was, I think, kind of just interesting that maybe some people, there's an education component that we probably need to be putting out, at least here locally. So I think that right now it looks like it was more maybe not the end user, but a decent representation of the town. I don't know what the current status is. The last I talked to the consultant, we had just over 300 responses, and there were a lot of kind of the dual income families that are in the like 30s to 50s range that are making over $100,000 a year, which is not likely the end user of our affordable housing production plan or the affordable housing units or anything that's really going to be coming out of this, aside from needing obviously area support. So I hope that we'll be able to glean that information when he reviews the survey at the next meeting, or whoever is present from the consultant company. And then you can answer that question a lot more specifically as to what the end result is versus the in progress.
Thank you. Helpful.
Does anyone else have any questions for Sam? Okay, and we don't have the consultant online still.
No, I'm guessing that they had an emergency.
Okay, well, just a couple of things that, and Sam, correct me if I'm wrong in any of these, that I kind of wanted to discuss, although it's not easy for me tonight. I made some notes. So the town has an affordable housing trust fund, as you all probably know, and it was something that was recommended going as far back as 2015 with $760,000 in there. Now it has $960,000 because we put $200,000 in ARPA money. That's currently being used for renters assistance. But the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is still in its infancy stage. So one of the things to consider trust fund play in a housing production plan, especially one that's still just really getting off the ground because it wasn't approved by the town until 2023 at the Springtown meeting. So that's something to think about. What role does that play? The next one is our SHI number, which we're currently at 9.13% as of October 24th. Is that right, Sam? 9.13%?
Yes.
Our subsidized housing inventory. And you all know the importance of being at 10% and what being at 10% does for a municipality as far as having control over its housing. So a couple of things to consider as we go forward is how should Wakefield address housing when we're at 10%? We're probably going to get to 10% soon. Right now, like I said, we're at 9.13, which is the highest that Wakefield has ever been. It was just a few years ago, we were at 7-point-something%. We've increased significantly over the last 2 or 3 years. Something else to think about is the town just passed the MBTA 48-3A law. What role does that play in a housing production plan at all? These are just things to think about. Another thing to remember is a housing production plan is approved by the state for 5 years. So what's going to happen here is we'll end up putting something together and presenting it to the town council. If the town council approves it, they will send it to the state, EOHLC, and then EOHLC, after they look it over and decide to approve it, will approve it for 5 years. The consultant's not on right now, but I anticipate by the time things get done and it goes to the council, it's going to be in the spring. If you go 3 months forward from that, the earliest it's going to be approved by the state is going to be sometime in the summer, early fall of 2025. That means it's good for 5 years. It's good till the summer of 2030. The reason that's important is And municipalities have dealt with this. Every 10 years, when the census comes out, the year-round housing units for municipality is reset by the state. And states sometimes find themselves where they're at greater, but then the census comes out and they fall below 10%. Where that's relevant for us is if we have a housing production plan that is approved, let's say in the summer of 25, it will be in effect until the summer of 2030. If it's below 10%, and we've been above 10% for the last few years, which I anticipate we're going to get to at some point in time, since we're at 9.13 now, that gives the town the first 6 months of 2030 to ask the state to renew the housing production plan for an additional 5 years. That's something that was not done with the last iteration of the housing production plan that was in existence from 2015 to 2020. Frankly, if that housing production plan, which expired in February 2020, had been updated and extended by Wakefield requesting that of the state, it would still be in effect until February 2025, and we wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now. So that timeline looking in the future is important, that if we do get a housing production plan approved by the state in the summer of 25, it's good to the summer of 30. And if our numbers fall below 10%, we have time to renew our housing production plan for an additional 5 years. And that's important because then you can get an approved housing production plan certified. But you need to have an approved housing production plan to get it certified. And certifying one also allows you to push back or deny 40Bs. We're not in a position to be able to do that right now. So something else that I wanted to mention that I would like to put into our plan when we eventually get it done is I want it to be on the town council's agenda twice a year. I want the town council to have to look at the housing production plan in January every year, and I want them to have to look at it in July of every year, especially when you look at it 2030 as to whether they need to update it and extend it for an additional 5 years. So those are just some of my preliminary thoughts about what role different things like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the fact that we're almost at 10%, we just passed the 48-3A law. These are things to think about as we go forward and continue to work on this plan. That was just my preliminary thoughts. Does anyone else have any comments or thoughts they want to share with the group?
Yeah, are
And
you
help me,
calculating
Sam,
the
if anybody
9%
raises
based
their
on the 2020 census housing denominator?
Yes,
Okay, well, shouldn't
that's
we
how they
actually,
calculate it.
so shouldn't we actually though know what the number is? Even if the state doesn't look at it, as it relates to planning, shouldn't we look at what
Yes,
the total denominator is now versus what we have in affordable?
Yeah, well, I know you and I have, and when Mike McLean had talked about this, that is something that's a little difficult because what's frustrated me is you can get a copy of your subsidized housing inventory numbers on a regular basis from the state. Like I can tell you right now, our numbers are what they are over the last few years. It was 703 in December of 2020. I can tell you, and as of October 24, it's 1,028. October 23, it was 998. You can get all this stuff from the state's website, but our overall number of 11,269 is the one that's in the 2020 census. I can't tell you what that number is right now. That part, not
Why?
SHI, but the other numbers.
No, why
I don't know.
can't we know that number?
We actually can't know
I
that.
don't know that answer. Sorry?
To the chair, I can actually answer that. Part of the reason why we don't know that number is because the records, believe it or not, COs were not digitized until halfway through 2020. So we don't even have, in order to, you have to put in a public records request, and I've asked the town to try to get that information, and we still have a gap from when the COs were issued prior to when they were digitized. I don't know why I haven't been able to get that number, but I've asked and I haven't been able to get it.
Yeah, I mean, like I had pulled information based on just what was pulled for permits. And we're not at 9% on current denominator. And once again, that's not 100% accurate. It's just something better than what we have, that we're at 8%. I mean, that's the whole point of planning, right? We can't bury our head in the sand on 2020 numbers when we're adding 400 units at the head of the lake, or 178 units at, and how many of those are actually going to be allocated as affordable? I mean, it just seems like that's not planning. Because that's exactly what Bob said, because we could end up at 2030 or 2030 and be back at whatever, under 10 again. And so that means we're not planning. We're not looking ahead to see where we're going to be. And what I was looking for, which I might end up, I don't know, talking to Theo, is that like, I tried to go through the minutes of the planning board to see what other things we haven't permitted, right? We haven't gotten a permit for them because they're not there yet, but are in the docket. Like how we have like the new hot stuff. That's 40B. So if it goes under 40B and X number of units, well, all those units will count. Okay, so what's that math? I mean, it seems like it's just a numbers game that I don't understand why we can't know what those numbers are. We have a board that actually gives permits for housing.
Yeah, it's been frustrating for Chair McLean and I the last few years as we started going back to when we started working on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. This has been frustrating.
Yep. Through the chair, one quick thing, and then I noticed Theo has his hand up. The town did not have a planner, a town planner, or anybody managing this from 2020 when their previous one, I think it was 2020, right, Theo? When he retired.
Yeah.
Whenever he retired, it was at least 4 years until I was hired in the very beginning of 2024. So there's been a number of years where this hasn't been managed. You're right. And it hasn't been overseen. And he had spreadsheets and was tracking all of it before then. But Erin, who was the only person hired, is not actually, I mean, she doesn't do urban planning. Was hired for economic development. And so she was handed all of the subsidized housing stuff, but was doing the best she can. She did an amazing job. She pulled together a bunch of information when none of that was actually together because the previous planner left and there was a gap and nothing had been managed in that time. And there wasn't a lot of information left over, nor was that person open to coming in to clarify things. So it's been trying to dig through files that are very confusing. There's not a lot of notes. I tried to even go into the basement to try to gather files. There's not even a numbering system right now for the applications that are reviewed by planning board. So you have to understand there's a lot of like just administrative stuff that we're trying to catch up on, and I'm doing my best. I totally hear you. I'm on the same page. We are working on it. It takes time as we manage all of that. And that's one thing that we're hoping that the Metro North Regional Housing Services Office membership could potentially help us with keeping up with that, as well as the housing production plan, to be able to stay on top of a lot of that and have a long-term plan for how to meet those numbers.
So I'm sorry, no, I'll let Theo go first because I have a question.
No, I thank you, Gail. I was just going to offer, I think getting a little bit of a primer on how the math works for SHI would be helpful, and maybe understanding a little bit of the process, because there's numbers do get filed periodically with the state. So
Yeah.
no, and so that might be helpful, and maybe there's something from Metro North that could give us that. I'd be happy to try to pull some of that together too. But the big point is it is an evolving, ever-changing thing, hence the need for a production plan. But also, I think we want to be much more strategic and planning ahead. Another part of the problem is some units are going to fall off the list. Their restriction will end. Or the housing becomes obsolete and needs to be replaced, something like that.
So Theo, my question as it relates to the planning board is, do you guys look at the last housing production plan when we're going for zoning or whatever on the, like, what's up for grabs now? Do you go, hey, well, the production plan from the last time said this. So I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, I think only as a reference document and more for information and I think the master plan is maybe a little more like all of the surveys that happened with Vision 2030 and the stuff that's still in the works for the master plan that's still being developed would be more context and more information. But if you're really looking for the hard math, it is yeah, it's a lot of management of information, sort of tracking the building permits and whatnot. So yeah, I think that, you know, the expired housing production plan is useful for it, you know, discussions of avenues like the trust fund or Community Preservation Act, you know, some other tools that Wakefield can be using to be more strategic about financing and developing and permitting and planning for housing. So
Yeah, I mean, the history, I'll add, oh, sorry, Theo. The bit of the history I'll add to that is when Councilor McLean and I looked at the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the Housing Production Plan from 2015 to 2020. When we started looking at it in 2022, what we found was the biggest recommendation was the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and there was $760,000 in there since 2015 for that purpose. That was the first thing that was worked on for us in 2022 that went to town meeting in the spring of 23 and passed unanimously. And now there's a board of trustees working on that component of housing. So the main recommendation in the 2015 to 2020 housing production plan has now been implemented. But that's why I said earlier it's still in its infancy stage, as opposed to being more robust if it had been implemented, you know, years before. So there is a treasure trove of information in the old housing production plan, but the main component was the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which at least we've now got that going. The reason we want to have another housing production plan is so that we can plan for our future and also make sure that if we aren't at 10%, like we're not now, we can get a housing production plan that's approved, get it certified by the state, where it's based on how much growth you've had on your subsidized housing inventory over a period of 1 or 2 years, and then you can get it certified for 1 or 2 years, and therefore say no to 40Bs that aren't positive for the town. You have that legal option to do that. We don't have that right now because we don't have an active housing production plan. So the past plan has a lot of good information in it, but a lot of it hadn't been acted on, although it's now been acted on with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and also the change to the town bylaws back in 2015 that led to the 18% of affordable housing. And that's why our numbers have gone up to 9.13. I mean, 10 years ago, we were at 6%. And just a couple of years ago, we were at 7.03% in December of 2020. So we've gone from 703 units in December of 2020 to 1,028 SHI new units as of October of 2024. So, you know, in September of 22, we were only at 7.06% on our SHI, and now we're at 9.13%. So we've made tremendous strides over the last few years, but that's why having a new housing production plan can help augment what we've been doing. But I share a lot of your frustrations, Gail, about about this. But we're moving in the right direction now with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and at the same time now having an active housing production plan advisory board, and hopefully having a new housing production plan by sometime in summer or fall of 2025.
Okay.
You have anything else, Sam, on this? I know I'm rattling a lot of numbers at you all. I mean, I've been working on this the last couple of years, but I think I'm pleased that we're moving in the right direction. I'm pleased with the composition of this advisory group, and I have to tell you, I've been incredibly impressed with the work of Sam Elliott, and I just worked with her on the MBTA 48-3A at the same time working with her on the housing production plan, and you're working with and you're working on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So she's been working on all three of these simultaneously, and they're all moving quite well. But we still have a lot of work that we're going to need to do. Did the consultant ever come on?
Yeah, I'm so sorry, you guys. I totally had this in for 7 p.m. and it's all my bad. I really do apologize. Will not happen again. So sorry, Bob and everyone.
Well, you're fortunate you're not in the United States Navy. That's a joke. I was a JAG officer in the Navy. Coming late was.
No,
go ahead. What do you?
I'm horrified.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. But please do accept my most sincere apologies. I'm so sorry, you all, and hope I didn't miss any really good discussion.
Yeah, through the chair, just really quick. No, I'll have minutes that I can send you the draft of, so you can catch up on what was
Okay.
discussed. And I just did a really brief overview, no details of anything that's gone on, because you have the details. So, but I did let them know that we're working on the housing needs assessment draft, and that the survey is technically closed. But I don't know if you have more tangible information on kind of the demographics that were hit. That was one question that came up.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I can do, let's just talk survey first. I wanted to do survey and then figure out our next meetings, and then I could maybe do some detail on housing needs and answer you guys' questions and try to make this like not take up too much more of your time. Basically, as the survey has been going on, every few weeks we enter in all of the demographic details into a Google sheet basically that compares it with census data. And I think the big headlines, at least for you guys, is overwhelmingly homeowners rather than renters, overwhelmingly people who live in single family homes rather than multifamily, a little bit higher income, I would say, as well. So really, we're at, I believe, and I put this in my slides, I believe it was a touch, so sorry. It had been going up a tick, and I wanted to take you guys' sort of temperature. We're at 489 responses as of this afternoon.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought I was still muted. I also have, sorry, I have 10 in my office that I need to input.
Yeah.
I had to run home today for a doctor's appointment, but for my kid. But so if I can still add those in.
Oh,
later.
definitely. And I wanted to ask you all, like, basically, I know Christmas can be a bit of a dead week in terms of responses, but I know we had set a 5% goal, which we're not quite at, which would have been 5% of 2,700. So not quite there, 27,000, excuse me. We could keep the survey open another week and a half or so if we want to keep people's try to get the number a little bit higher, but totally up to you guys. I just wanted to see if Bob or anyone else had a thought.
Personally, I see no reason why. I think we should keep it open. Yeah. I don't know if we have to vote on something like that. I think if the consensus is to keep it open because we didn't lock into a date, right? We didn't have a locked in date. So I think if we want to keep it open if your advice is to keep it open longer, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I spoke with, yes, can hear you.
Oh no, I'm getting unstable network connection on my computer, and I'm not computer savvy, so I just want to make sure you can hear me.
No, coming in loud and clear. I mentioned this to Jen last week, and she advised maybe another week or two could be good. Just if there are any stragglers, anyone who felt like they didn't get a chance, and then we can really say that like we gave folks an opportunity. And I know I'm taking off next week, so I wouldn't get a chance to really dive into the numbers until after Christmas anyway. So if we keep it open, I say no harm.
Does anyone have any thoughts or comments on that? I don't see any hands. Okay,
Okay.
thanks, Noah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So other item of business was just locking in our recurring monthly meeting for this plan through April 2025. And I had suggested the third Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. And I believe Alex reached out and said it would not work for her, but wondered maybe we could also do a show of hands if that sort of general rhythm would not work for you to do the meetings.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? The third what?
Yeah.
Sorry.
The third Thursday, or excuse me,
Third.
third Tuesday of the month. So we would meet again on Tuesday, January. Oh, sorry, I was on December. Tuesday, January 21st. Got a thumbs up from Don.
The
But maybe the
21st
7
is,
o'clock or 6.
6, yeah, 6 is totally fine too. And I'll definitely be there next time. My apologies again.
Oh, because I'm sorry, but 7 o'clock, I'm gonna start
Yeah.
to sleepy.
If it's too late, yeah, that's totally fine. I'm happy to do
Like
it
by 8
earlier.
o'clock done, I'm like, I should be in my pajamas by then.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy third Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m. And I know Alex, you had a bit of a conflict, but I'd be happy to just make a note of my calendar to email you things ahead of time to provide written comments, or maybe 6 is a little easier for you.
It's better. I can probably be there for 55 minutes. Just
Oh.
at the other meeting I have.
Alex,
Fantastic.
Alex is on.
Well, then I'll confer with Samantha and we'll get an agenda put up for this next meeting in January, which will have a little bit of reading for you to do beforehand. We'll send it a week before, but it'll be some of the charts and graphs I'm going to show you guys. Just take like 5-10 minutes because I know it's getting a little late, getting sleepy. We'll have that, and then some work on, who took the survey, what did we learn from it, what were the biggest things we heard, a few takeaways from interviews, because I've been doing those concurrently. And then if we have time, we'll squeeze in some words on development constraints and local capacity, which are 2 other chapters that are required to be in the plan. Probably like not as exciting or interesting as housing needs and goals and strategies, but we'll talk through it and get you guys' thoughts on the 21st.
Theo, you
Cool.
have your
Well-
hand raised.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
if we don't have a, 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 a decent representation of renters, I mean, I think we can go to some of the Vision 2030 responses, like, so like the town's had 2 other planning efforts in the last 2.5 years or longer. We might be able to pull some info there, but what are there other options or other
Yeah,
proxies?
I think first of all, when showing the survey data, I'll make sure to point out here is where this is, you need to take the takeaways with a grain of salt, basically, because we missed out on our renters, and also people who make under 100K and people of color. They're pretty much unfortunately like almost always underrepresented in surveys. It's always people who have the most time that are maybe not working and yeah, have the freedom to do that. But I would be more than happy to take a look at any other survey data you guys have and pull away some key takeaways. And basically the point of all of that is to inform you when we get to goals and strategies in a few months. You can read through it and say like, oh, this is what we heard. So it doesn't have to be from this survey. I think totally anything that's recent and you feel like is important could inform the strategies we ultimately put in the plan. Yeah, great thoughts. Well, Bob, if it's okay with you, I thought I might show some charts and graphs before everyone falls asleep and basically say we'll send you guys a PDF to read through right after the holiday.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, please do.
I'm gonna speed through it because I know it is getting a little later. And see if my screen shares appropriately. Can you guys see my survey update slide? Is that sharing?
Yeah.
Nothing
No.
showing
Oh,
yet.
Yes.
okay, cool, perfect. All right, we got through our survey, our meeting, our regular meeting things. So let me just give you guys some headlines, and then maybe we'll have some thoughts on ideas or data you were like, oh, I wish they had that, and then we can go in and pop it into the written version. Basically, we look at historic population change with the census, and then two different population projections. One is by the UMass Donahue Policy Institute, and the other is by MassDOT. This is MassDOT's population projections. And as you can see, there's projection of a little bit of growth, about 2,000 residents, give or take, by 2050. Interestingly, the UMass one says Wakefield's actually going to lose a little bit of population in that same time period of several hundred residents. So we're seeing either some slow growth or no growth at all, and actually losing a little bit of population. But definitely some shifts that I'll share in just a second. We looked at a lot of this was looking in context with your last HPP, your last housing production plan. And so it was interesting seeing how the share of renters and owners has shifted in basically the last 10 years. It used to be closer to an 80-20 split. And now it is more 70-30 as more rental housing has been built. I think my marquee headline that just I've been really noticing in a lot of towns lately is 60% of households in Wakefield and many other towns in the region consist of just one or two people, which is really interesting thinking about housing needs and shifting and maybe what we're building to meet the needs of smaller households. These could be seniors, these could be maybe young families, couples, people who are maybe not having kids or not or choosing to not to because of price reasons. But basically this dark blue and this lighter blue are our 1 and 2 person households in Wakefield, and that's projected to essentially increase over time. So similar to the renters and owners shifting in the equation, there's been a shift too, in a sort of getting closer to 50-50 of 50% of homes in Wakefield are detached single family homes. Imagine the home with the white picket fence. The other half are not. They're all manner of multifamily, single family attached to like a townhouse, you could say. A good amount of duplexes over here. And then really running the gamut in terms of different kinds of multifamily. That's essentially they've all been growing since your last HPP. Did a fun graph here, basically looking at how inflation adjusted rent in Wakefield has changed over time, and also the average wage. So the buying power of that wage, and that's in the sort of brown orange here, with the navy being the rent. And rent is, especially in the last 5 years, has really gone up, and the buying power of the average wage has gone down. So folks who are renting now and earning around that area might be struggling more than they used to make that 2,474, which is basically the average 2-bedroom going rate in Wakefield as of this month. We use a source called Rentometer to look at that. Other side of the equation, even starker, I think, disparities in affordability and attainability. The median single family home sales price, $805,000. The median, so that's the middle one. So half of them are going for more and half of them are going for less. And that's also for this year. I was doing interviews last week and spoke to the woman who runs the food pantry and learned so many great things. And she was talking about how she purchased her home in Wakefield back when they were in the 170 or 190,000 range back in the 90s. And it's kind of just crazy to see how much that price has increased over time.
Noah,
Yeah.
are we adjusting for inflation with comparing
Yes,
to 170,000?
good question. These are not inflation adjusted. That's a good thing to note there. So yeah, that'd be a nice thing to sort of redo this and check that out. Appreciate it. Okay, made a note of that. Similarly, and this is also not adjusting for inflation, but just looking at property tax rates over the last 20 years or so, and the increase in the assessed value of homes. So while your property tax rates have stayed pretty flat, increased a little bit, that assessed residential rate has increased by twofold. So while folks that maybe bought their home back when it was $190,000, living on a fixed income, you can see there's a real burden for people who already own in the community and maybe are struggling with that. So I wanted to make sure we had some good data on how someone who's already in the community and not looking to buy might also be struggling with housing affordability. Vacancy, I think the big takeaway here is just that a healthy vacancy rate for homeownership is 5 to 8%, and yours is about 1%. So it's a very, very tight market. Rental, the vacant units on here, the most of them are units that are listed at least. They're on the market to be sold or they're rented and no one's living in there, which is why it seems so high. But the most of this 355 number are those. Similarly, just to show again, drive home the point, there's not a lot of supply on the market. Just 1.2 months of supply for a homeownership home in Wakefield, with 5 or 6 months supply considered normal. And that's basically the amount of time it's estimated for a home to be sold when it's put on the market. So a really, really constrained market there with vacancy and supply. All right, so this is sort of the big graph with calculations. Essentially what this means is you would need to earn $270,000 annually to afford a mortgage for a home in Wakefield today at that $800,000 price. This lower one, $194,000, that's if you were trying to purchase the median condo. All of these bars are different household groups in Wakefield, with this one on the left being the median town household at $125,000. So even for folks that already exist in Wakefield, that already live there, buying a home would be difficult. So there's people who are locked in and bought their home a while ago, or maybe someone who's renting and wants to buy, but just that gap between what their income might be and what it's costing is it's pretty huge. So we do the same thing for renters. Not quite the same stark story, but I will note this bar on the right is the median renter household, what they could afford to pay in rent. And what that essentially means is the median renter household could afford to pay about $1,800 a month without being cost burden. Cost burden means you're paying more than a third of your income for housing. And that's basically the big indicator that HUD uses, the Department of Housing and Urban Development uses to differentiate if someone is struggling with housing. It's not the greatest, but it's what we've got. And basically what this is saying is that 50% of your renters are cost burden or struggling. And I will note here, this number of $1,800, it's a little bit lower because the census, for whatever reason, seems to undercount rent. So I would go with the $2,400 figure that we were looking at earlier for the more up-to-date market one. I think that one's more accurate. All right, as I sort of whip through this, I think the thing to remember is that there are 3,000 households in Wakefield today that are cost burdened, that are paying that more than 1/3 of their income on rent. And that's where a lot of the need lies. And in particular, over here on the left, with this sort of brown area, that means those folks are severely cost burdened. So instead of paying 30%, they're paying 50% of their income towards rent. And there's 835 households today who are really struggling there. Overall, these are 40% of all renters, 20% of homeowners, and HUD does a really good job of breaking that out, and so you can go into the details of where is the need. But I would just identify that as extremely low income, 30% of area median income, and that number is for area median income is 150,000. There's a real need at the bottom end. But yeah, in particular, it's well distributed at the same time, these 3,000 households that are struggling currently. Just to explain this 456 number of affordable housing units, you have one state list called the Subsidized Housing Inventory that lists, I believe, like the most current is 1,028. The problem is some of those units that are listed on it aren't actually affordable. They get built through a 40B process, or maybe only 25% are. All of those get listed on there, so we can say, oh, there's 1,000 affordable units in Wakefield, when in reality, according to the Housing Navigator Massachusetts database, which is really a great tool, and they do this for every single town. You can go in and find a much closer, more accurate version of the actual affordable units. So of your 456, there are still 2,460 households who are cost burdened, paying that more than 30%, who would also, based on their income, qualify for affordable housing. So a huge gap there. And as I'm wrapping up, just wanted to note there's another bucket of folks, what we're calling the attainable housing category. So this is over that threshold to qualify for affordable housing, above 80% AMI, but not quite so much that you're making $270,000 to be able to buy a house in your household. We estimate that there's about 2,600 of these households in Wakefield now, and maybe they bought their home while it was a little more doable, or they're renting and would like to stay in the community, and really finding that to be an obstacle. So in particular, there's a similar need, perhaps not as dire, but there are people who don't make enough to get traditional subsidized housing, can't purchase a home at the same time, and we'll have to think later on about strategies for them. So my colleague Flavio, he does some really cool math estimating based on some of the projections we talked about at the beginning of this, getting a little more fine-grained and thinking, how is Wakefield going to grow or change? He estimates a need for 988 net new housing units in Wakefield by 2040. And we looked at it in terms of age range. Who is this going to be for? Particularly in the growth scenario, it's almost entirely seniors. There's almost 1,000, a little over 1,000, an 1,100 person jump in terms of seniors in Wakefield, of household rather, so even more. So senior housing, we project, is going to be a huge need. And in particular, going back to those household sizes, also said, well, how many bedrooms are we going to need in these new housing units we're projecting? Really a lot of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units to accommodate this growth, this shifting of different age groups in Wakefield. And just the last, to put another just little note on it, we're also going to really need some affordable units at the same time, both affordable and accessible, particularly on the lower end of the income spectrum for our projected growing senior population. So last slide, just the takeaways: decreasing household sizes. We've seen some growth in your multifamily and rental stock in Wakefield, but homeownership opportunities are broadly unaffordable. Rent is getting there. It's not quite so bad as homeownership, but it's getting there. And there's a deficit today of at least 2,400 income restricted units to meet the needs of your cost burden population today in Wakefield. At the same time, there's attainable ownership and rental opportunities for folks who are priced out of that market. And then really just wanting to focus on your projected senior household growth. And when we get to goals and strategies, we can think of like a whole suite of options there. But yeah, hopefully that didn't take up too much of you guys' time, and I'll stop sharing, and maybe if anyone has any questions for me or ideas for directions that we could go in.
But Karen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so the senior housing growth, this is something that I hear a lot from my age group. I'm 60 and I do know people that are older and that they own homes. Not everybody wants to live in an apartment. That's why a lot of us are seeing that nobody is downsizing, because we do not want to go from living in a home, walking 4 steps and going to our driveway, or having a small backyard to go to an apartment style living. People don't want to do that. There's a lot of people that don't want to do that. So when you say that we have to plan for ahead, and all we keep seeing is giant buildings being built with apartments or condos in them, not everybody wants that. Maybe we need to look further towards townhouses or smaller homes again. And I get it. You know what? The developers don't want to build those because they can make more money with larger units. But that's something that I've been hearing a lot of, and I just wanted to stick that out there now.
Yeah, that's great. And definitely not trying to lead you guys towards any one solution to stuff. So love townhouses and smaller scale things. It's Karen.
Mhm.
I can't see everybody on the screen. If you can help me, Sam, who's got their hands up?
Sure. Alex has her hand up.
Yeah, just piggybacking off that, working in
Go ahead.
real estate, I think seeing a lot of, people don't want to downsize to apartments. I see that, as well as most older people who probably would be downsizing right now have such low interest rates because they bought 20, 30 years ago and refinanced and probably have a 2%. And to buy a smaller house is actually 9 times out of 10 far more expensive than to just stay where they are, which then contributes to inventory for younger families that, may want to move into the town, but, there's 2, 3 houses, single families for sale on any given week in Wakefield most of the time, and just driving the prices up for them too. So I think inventory all around.
Yeah, absolutely. Heard some similar stuff talking to the COA last week.
Does anyone else have their hands up? I can't see everybody on the screen.
I might have seen Theo's
I will
hand.
note. All right, Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah, Theo. All right, Theo,
Yeah.
it's one of you two. Go ahead.
No, no,
Sam,
it's
go ahead.
Okay. So I'd love to be able to like get, I'm sure you'll be sending out the slides. I want to like actually spend some time really reading it, looking at it. But will you be also sending any of like the backup data, anything else to like, if I wanted to
Yeah.
delve deeper instead of like asking you a bunch of questions over email, like if I could just pick at or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. We're still basically been going back and forth with Samantha on the written document, and I'm gonna commit to a week before our next meeting, we're gonna send out a nice like 30 or 40 page PDF that you can really get into. But after this meeting, after we hop off, I'll send the whole slides to you guys so you can take a peek right now, and then yeah, since we are still sort of ironing out the exact things to put in there, send me your thoughts and suggestions, and would love to tailor it to make sure it's right for Wakefield.
Thank you.
Does anyone else? I can't tell. Does anyone else have their hands up?
I might have seen Theo's.
One of the things I will note, Theo was up and then he went back down. Do you have anything, Theo?
No, I'm mostly thinking out loud, so I'll think to myself at the moment. But I really like the slides, and I really like sort of the opportunity that we can have a discussion, like talking about like exactly what Karen was talking about, and Alex, about sort of what kinds of housing is being demanded. And I don't have answers, so I'm like I'm excited for those conversations.
Yeah, and I'll just add, sorry, just very briefly, we're gonna do an in-person community event in the spring, and we can think what kind of questions do we want to ask the community too, like about housing types and styles, and really like get the temperature.
Gail, you have your hand up.
Also, are you factoring in, or how is ADUs going to be factored into this? This gets back to the older population. I mean, I know our neighbors just ADU'd their house. And so the mom and dad are now living in the ADU unit, and the kids, their kids and the grandkids are living in the big house. So is that something to look at with the production plan of like encouraging ADU units, or?
Yeah, and Samantha might have a better answer for me on this. I know February 3rd, I believe, is when the new state requirements go in, and towns have a little bit of leeway in terms of what do you want to allow short-term rentals, for example, or not. And so we can also, as a working group, as a committee, decide or potentially influence that, or have recommendations in the plan at the very least. I'll just note, wrapping up Danvers's housing production plan, and we asked in the survey, like, how likely are you to do an ADU? And I'd say 55% of people said probably not, and 45% were like, could be interesting. So I'm also like on the wait and see approach of how widespread they'll actually be. But it's really interesting to hear about like real world examples of people doing it. And could be another good option for multi-generational households, people getting to stay in their home and get a little extra income. So yeah, interested to see how it pans out, just like everyone
Well,
else.
One quick thing to add for clarification. We have technically like a relative apartment, accessory apartment allowed by special permit in Wakefield. So there have been some that existed, but there's a whole bunch of parameters on them. And they have to be contained within the structure. So there will be some changes to that. I'm working on it with planning board right now. And hopefully we'll have legislation for spring. Well, no, we will have legislation for spring town meeting. So we will have a donut hole when everything becomes legal in February, where it's not totally the Wild West or anything, but it does allow for a little bit a wider range. I think one thing that might be helpful to Noah is to look at sharing whether or not short-term rentals, if you're seeing kind of what the trends that are going on elsewhere, that short-term rentals are impacting the year-round housing count. And we don't have a ton in Wakefield, but whether or not that would be something that could be suggested as we're planning, they're prohibited under MBTA communities. We're planning on prohibiting them for ADUs, but whether or not that's something that we should look at on a larger scale would be kind of interesting as a potential suggestion to look into to give you kind of everybody's a little bit of the answers on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love
Sam,
to. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Sam, if I could, just a couple of things that Noah touched on. You're also working with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Can you just briefly describe what endeavors you all are doing with renters assistance right now, with some of the ARPA money that went into there was $760,000 set aside for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but then an extra $200,000 in ARPA funds went, and those ARPA funds are being used
Yeah, right now the Wakefield, it's called WRAP, W-R-A-P. It's the Wakefield Renters Assistance Program, and it covers the security deposit, that kind of expense, utility deposit that's required, and then it can cover moving expenses. All of those together, the combined maximum can be up to $5,000. It's a one-time grant, and people have to be qualified based on their income. So it's 80% AMI or less. And I think it's really the basics of it. I've got 6 applications that have been approved so far. So they're just starting to check through, and it was released on October 1st, but not put out, and it took a little bit of time to get in the paper and everything. But we are also still talking to other people about having applications, and have started working with the housing authority as well to try to help get some of the word out, and has been well received because it's a gap that doesn't exist with state assistance right now.
Thank you. Did you have additional information, Noah?
Oh, no, I really just wanted to note, I saw in the big state housing bill over this summer that also did ADUs, there was a line item about a similar program to what Samantha's talking about. So it's cool. Like, it's a great idea, and it's so exciting to hear that like it's going to be happening in Wakefield probably before everywhere else. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. If you're done with your presentation, Sam, I don't think there's anything else on the agenda unless anybody has anything they want to say. All right, and our next meeting is going to be January 21st at 6 o'clock. Is that right?
Yes, 6 p.m. sharp.
And we'll do the October 15 minutes then, and we'll do the minutes from this meeting at that one as well, right, Sam? Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, my mouse isn't working great. Sorry. Yes, I will have all of the stuff sent out, and I'll also disseminate any additional information that Noah has, so it's all accessible before the meeting.
Is that the results of the survey too? Will we get those before the next meeting, or does that take a little longer to do, Noah?
Oh no, absolutely. Even if we keep it open until, New Year's Day or the day after, it's a pretty quick turnaround, and maybe we'll dedicate 10, 15 minutes to talk about that and ask questions. But absolutely, we'll talk survey next meeting.
Does anyone on the advisory committee have anything they want to say? I do want to thank you all for volunteering to serving on this advisory committee. This is extremely important for the town. So the fact that you're taking the time to help us with this endeavor is very important. I also want to let you know the reason I appear to be underdressed is I'm actually wearing my United States Navy shirt since we had a great win over Army on Saturday. So that's why I was wearing my Navy shirt today. Always a big deal when Navy's able to beat Army in football. Okay, if we're done then, if anyone has a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Right, anybody second? All right, so we've been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Gail had the motion. Who seconded it?
Sam
I
Hockenberry.
can't see.
And
Who?
Sam
Oh, thank you.
Hockenberry.
All right, if you can record that. Yeah, thanks. Sam Elliott, if you can record that. All right. We'll have to do. Can you do a roll call vote for me, Sam?
Sure. I still have the list of who's present. Okay. So let's see here. Alex.
And Alex is here. Yeah.
I don't know. You're muted. I'm not sure if you're able to unmute.
Here, yes.
Okay. We're voting on the motion to adjourn.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Sam Hockenberry.
Yes.
Okay. Karen McMaster.
Yes.
Okay. Make sure I have everybody showing on my, I don't have any extra people. Okay. Don Valerio.
Yes.
Okay. Lorna Davidson Conley.
Yes.
Karen DeJoy.
Yes.
Karen McMaster.
Yes.
Theo Knoll.
Yes.
Carol Plotkin.
Yes.
Gail Sievert.
Yes.
And Bob Vincent.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So thank you all, and we'll see you on January 21st at 6 o'clock.
Thank you as well.
Is there anything else I
Happy-
need to take care of? Sam?
Happy holidays.
Happy
Happy
holidays
holidays
to
to
all.
everybody.
Yes.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you guys volunteering for this. Thank you very much.